We're on to U.S. Government's Chapter 4, and we're covering the legislative branch. So we're going to be talking about the lawmakers. Please take notes as you go. In Chapter 4, we're going to go over in more detail the legislative branch. First, I want to point out that the federal government consists of three main branches of government. As you see on the left, there's the legislative branch, which is mentioned in Article 1. Then there's the executive branch, which is mentioned in Article 2. And then there's the judicial branch, which is mentioned in Article 3 of the Constitution. As you notice in the legislative branch, it's Congress. And Congress has two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. We will go into more detail with the legislative branch. Next, we will discover what the executive branch consists of, and then we'll close out the judicial branch. But that will come in following chapters. The Congress of the United States is the legislative branch of the federal government. Legislative has a Latin root, legislate. It means law. So legislative means to make law. Congress is divided into two parts. So we have the House of Representatives and the Senate. The writers of the Constitution did not want one group of officials to become too strong, so they made two parts to the Congress. The Senate, which has 100 senators total, 2 from each state, and the House of Representatives, depending on each state's population. So we have 435 representatives. Voters in each state elect the people who work in these two houses of Congress. Every new law for the nation must be passed by a majority, or more than half, of votes in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So the Senate needs a leader in order to keep everything organized and structured, especially when there are debates over certain bills. The Vice President of the United States is the leader of the Senate. Currently, Joe Biden is our Vice President, and he's paired up with Obama. The Vice President tends to be busy and is present only for the very important debates. When he's not around, there is the President pro tempore to fill in his duties. Pro tempore is Latin for the word temporary. The Senate elects the President pro tempore to perform the Vice President's duties. The President pro tempore is usually the member of the majority party who has served the longest in the Senate. Now, the majority party usually tends to be either Democrat or Republican. So, when they say the majority of the party, they mean the one that is represented most in the Senate. So, of the 100, say for instance there are 60 Democrats and only 40 Republicans, the majority party would be the Democrats. So then the President pro tempore would most likely be the veteran of the Democrats. So the question is, who can be a senator? And then, who are our senators in California? Well, first, there are 3 main rules to being a senator. You must at least be 30 years old. You have to have lived in the United States for at least 9 years, so you can be from another country. You have to have residency here. Must be a resident of the state they represent. So for instance, if you're going to be a senator of New York, you need to live in New York. And your term is 6 years once you are elected. So that's a long term. It's 2 years longer than the president. So California has 2 senators, as do all states. Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, they're both Democrats. And they've been going at this for a long time. It's pretty impressive. These 2 women have been senators for a good, 20 years. So Obviously, the voters overall are happy with what they've been doing. I think that's it for who can be a senator. We'll go on to talk about representatives next. So as we recall, in Article 1, it mentions that the Congress will be split into two groups, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives is much larger than the Senate. For instance, California currently has 53 U.S. representatives. The representatives serve 2-year terms in office, and so what that means is they need to be re-elected after 2 years. There are some requirements to be a representative. The first, of course, is to be voted in. But the only way you have a chance to be voted in is you must be 25 years old. You must be a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. And you have to be a resident of the state and district you live in. Now, in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what I mean when I say district. So there are 435 districts in the United States. And so what that means is there are 435 representatives that run for 2 years. Our representative in South Lake Tahoe, in his district, it's called the 4th Congressional District, and his name is Tom McClintock. So he'll be in office for 2 years, and then when that's up, our district will vote for him or someone else. The average population per district is 710,767 people. So what that means is California has 53 districts, meaning 53 representatives. So that's a lot of districts. And if you look on the colorful image of the United States, all those colors are districts. And as you can see in California, there are a number of colors, and that's associated with population. So every 710,000 people or so, there'll be a representative, and they work in our Congress. So who is the leader of the House of Representatives? We call the leader of the House of Representatives the Speaker of the House, and currently John Boehner, a Republican, is the Speaker of the House. What his role is that he leads sessions, he decides who may speak, he calls for votes, and places members of the House on committees, and he also makes sure everyone is following the rules. Now remember, Congress is a law-making body, so John Boehner is pretty much leading the House of Representatives and kind of being the orchestrator of the process of creating law and passing law. The Speaker of the House can also become President of the United States, believe it or not. But that would be if the President and Vice President cannot serve. So, who is the Speaker of the House? Well, the Speaker represents the majority in the House of Representatives, the majority party. So, typically, again, it's either Democrats or Republicans. And in the House of Representatives, for instance, I'm just going to throw a number out there, there's 325 representatives that are Republicans. Well, that's the majority over the 170 some odd that would be Democrat. So that's called the majority party. So those members vote when it's time for the Speaker of the House. And so they voted for John Boehner this time. And his role will last 2 years, and then again they'll vote again for a new Speaker of the House. So now we're midway through this chapter, and we're going to do a little review. If you could name the 2 parts of Congress, and then what are the requirements to be a senator? Meaning, what's the age requirement? And what are some of the other things that are important for the senator to be before they can run for office? Same for number 3, what are the requirements to be a representative? And then number 4, briefly explain what a district is or what it means. Why is a district important? Why should we even know that? And number 5, name 2 elected officials mentioned in this presentation and what their role is. Feel free to use the back button and review. So how Congress works is it has a few duties. The first is that, the main one, is that it makes laws. And a lot of those laws include what I'm going to mention. Congress deals with collecting taxes. The IRS is overseen by Congress. So the fact that you're paying taxes on your wage, that has to do with Congress. And those taxes help pay for public services such as your school, such as certain health care, such as Social Security. So Congress oversees that, and that's an extraordinary, incredibly large responsibility. They also have to do with maintaining the armed forces. So if you plan on joining the Army or the Navy, they're right now, for instance, considering reducing the number of people in the armed forces, and that would have an impact on potential jobs and also on what kind of defense we have. Also, they deal with regulating trade, and trade is a big deal when what they mean by trade is foreign trade. States deal with interstate trade, meaning between. When we're talking about regulating trade, we're talking about between, for instance, India or Korea or China. One of our biggest is China. So they try to determine if we're hurting our local businesses by trading too much with other countries. And they regulate that trade through something called tariffs, which is actually a tax on foreign goods. So why does this matter? Well, foreign goods might have higher taxes because they're wanting people to buy more locally produced items to improve our own economy, to provide for more jobs for people here. So that's a big power that Congress has, is in regulating trade. Also in regulating trade is determining, are we sanctioning or certain countries, or are we at war with certain countries? We might decide not to trade with them. We might refuse certain resources that they might need from us. There might be certain produce or oil or rubber. Who knows what it may be? Most likely it isn't oil. It would be something like steel or rubber that another country needs. And we could decide if we're having a dispute with another country. It would be up to Congress to decide to regulate trade with them. Punishing crimes is another big one with Congress. They also suggest amendments. They can check on other branches, so they can actually investigate if the president has done something wrong. They can investigate, and this is a good thing. It keeps the president from becoming corrupt. And as an example, in 1973, the Senate formed a committee to investigate activities with the president. It was Richard Nixon. President Richard Nixon had some people break in to the offices in the Watergate apartments. And so the investigators tried to get tape recordings. And so they did. And the matter went before the Supreme Court because we found that Richard Nixon was doing some things that were in violation of the law, that were secretive. And the Supreme Court ordered tapes to be released, and the House set to debate Nixon's impeachment. But before Nixon was impeached, he resigned in 1974. it is tempting for many presidents to be bought, and I'm sure most of us are aware of that. So Congress can accuse or impeach a public official if they have committed a crime. Let's move on to floor leaders. Floor leaders tell other senators and representatives about new bills that will be voted on. They work closely with the Speaker of the House. Now, the Speaker of the House is Boehner right now, and that's the majority of the House who votes for him. And then the floor leader also works with the leader of the Senate, which is the Vice President, if you recall. The Vice President is the leader of the Senate, and together they manage debates and committee business. So managing debates is a very challenging task because things can get very heated. Imagine debating your most sensitive issues with someone. So it really does require strong leaders on the floor to direct them and to keep the rest of Congress on task. So that's kind of a very rough overview of how Congress works. Okay, now we're getting into the juicy stuff. This is how laws are made. So we start with, what is a bill? A bill is an idea for a new law or a change in an old law. The idea can come from citizens who write their senators or representatives with a suggestion. Pretty cool. Citizens tend to think that they participate in a democracy by just voting. That is nothing compared to what people can do. Writing your senator or a representative is a very powerful thing. And if they get a number of requests covering a certain theme, they will actually consider that bill. So, believe it or not, there is a power in the people more than just voting. The president, senators, and representatives can also suggest ideas for bills. So, what I want you to do now is to spend a few minutes writing an idea you would like Congress to consider. It could be anything from improving road conditions, public school equipment, job opportunities, or crime prevention. It could be anything that comes to your mind. And then just name a representative or senator we mentioned earlier that you would send it to. And really, it's that easy. All you need is an address and a stamp. Okay, we're coming towards the closing of Chapter 4. This is an important one. It's how a bill becomes a law. So say, for instance, you were really good at writing a letter to one of your representatives. And let's say, for instance, it had to do with water quality control. The people in your community were falling ill, and it turned out that scientists discovered a high level of toxins in the water due to poisonous fluids coming out of a local factory. Let's just say that that's the case. Well, the bill is actually considered. So any member can introduce a piece of legislation. And remember, legislate means law, so a piece of law. So legislation is handed to the clerk of the House or placed in the hopper. And what a hopper is it's basically the clerk's desk, and there's a place where different Congress people can just drop a proposed bill in. So the bill is assigned a number. So you'll see, if you ever have to look up a bill, you'll see either HR with a number or S with a number. HR means House of Representatives, and S means Senate. So you'll know if the bill originated with the House of Representatives or with the Senate. The bill is labeled with the sponsor's name. So say we wrote to McClintock, and that's our local representative. So he actually really responded to your water issues. So he's writing up a bill, and they call it H.R. 2. And he's a sponsor. He's going to be the author of the bill. The bill is sent to the government printing office, and they make copies so that anyone involved is going to read it. The Senate bills can be jointly sponsored, meaning many of the other senators might approve of your bill and they, quote, sponsor it. Members can co-sponsor even a piece of law. So that's the very beginning stages of a bill. Once it's assigned its number, it's introduced in the House or Senate, and in our case it's the House, into a committee. There's thousands of bills introduced every year. So that's too many for one big group to go over. So there's special committees designated. So there might be a committee on environmental issues, and that's their specialty. So there's a House committee specializing in environmental issues, and they're going to look over that water bill. The bill could be dropped or approved. Maybe the House committee really likes what's being said in this bill, and they send it to a subcommittee. So this is an even smaller committee that's even more refined and has time to really research the bill and maybe suggest changes. Again, the bill could be dropped or approved, and it's sent back to the committee. So we're going back to the committee, and the bill could be, again, dropped or approved, and then it goes back to the House or Senate, but in our case it's the House. So let's just say that our incredible bill, we're requesting improvement in our water conditions, purified water, safer water, more restraints on factory output of chemicals. Let's just say they like what's going on here. It's put on the House calendar, so that means it's going to be debated. And then next, the bill's being debated in the House. Maybe some of the representatives say, this is too costly, we can't appropriate funds to support this bill, meaning appropriate means channel money into supporting that bill, because having more restrictions on factory disposal of chemicals could be costly, or implementing those to make sure the laws being enacted could be costly, or whatever. Or perhaps, which is quite often the case, unfortunately, someone in House has connections with the factory owners and doesn't want to upset them. So the debates go on and on. Now, after the debates, it could be approved. We don't know. If it is, the president could choose to sign the bill into law or veto the law. It's called a pocket veto. He doesn't sign it, he or she doesn't sign it. The president could send it back with reasons why they didn't sign it. And it could go back and discussed. And actually, they could override the president's veto with a 2/3 vote. Now, that's a lot. 2/3 vote of Congress, so everybody has to be involved. What does 2/3 mean? Well, let's look at it this way. Congress total, if we add senators, that would be 100 senators and 435 House of Representatives. That would make 535 people. 2/3 of them means 357 have to agree with the bill. That is not very likely. In fact, that's quite rare. But if the president does sign the bill, it becomes a law and it passes. So, that's the way it is. That's how a bill becomes a law. And maybe you just saved your community. Okay, now we're on to more committees and committees and committees. Committees are wonderful in the fact that they study a bill because there's a lot that needs to be thought through. So we're going to go through these committees because they review a bill. And let's just say they're reviewing your water bill. First, what are the congressional committees? There are 5. There are standing committees, subcommittees, joint committees, select committees, and conference committees. So let's begin with, I'm going to skip congressional committee right now and skip to the standing committees. Standing committees tend to be permanent committees, and they review certain topics. So each committee is themed. For instance, there's the Ways and Means Committee. It's the oldest committee. It's from 1789 is its birth time, and it deals with tax writing. So it helps to raise revenue for our government, keeps our government going. Okay, so that's one example of a standing committee. There are many other examples. For instance, there's ones that focus on the armed services and foreign affairs. So hopefully when congressmen and women select people for a certain committee, it's because they have a specialty in that area, because we want people reviewing bills who have background. Okay, so we're going to move on to the subcommittees, which are just bills could be even passed on to a subcommittee, as we noticed in our chart in the prior page. Subcommittees are even a more centralized, focused committee that works even more intensively on a bill and exploring the topic more thoroughly. They actually hold hearings. What does that mean when you hold hearings? Well, they bring in experts on the topic, and they listen to what they have to offer regarding the bill. So, for instance, with the water bill, we might have scientists, biologists come in and discuss the issues. We might have architects coming in, all kinds of people that can offer insight as to whether the bill is something that can be achieved and if it's purposeful. And what are the consequences of the bill? Oftentimes we can't foresee what will happen once a bill is implemented. So we need to have caution. There are also joint committees. And when you think of a joint, think of your arm, where your elbow is. Your two bones meet there. And so when we say joint, what we mean is the two houses. So we've got the Senate and the House of Representatives coming together, kind of like your two arms at the elbow. You're not your two arms, but your two bones at the elbow. So they work together and review, and hopefully it becomes bipartisan when that happens. Select committees are formed in either the House of Congress. In either House of Congress, they set up for a limited time. So it's not a permanent thing like the standing committee. They handle issues of national importance, so it's more broad. And in the past, they reviewed what I discussed earlier, the Central Intelligence Agency and the Watergate investigation that had to do with near impeachment. Select committees last for up to 2 years or one term of Congress. Let's see, then we're on to conference committees. Yes, indeed. And this is when a bill is sent to the President, it must be passed in both the Senate and the House, okay? So before that water bill even gets to be seen by the President, both houses have to approve. A special committee known as the Conference Committee settles any differences in the bill, and so they might make some changes and adjustments. And then after it is worked on by the Conference Committee, it goes back to both houses for approval. So there's a lot of working and reworking these bills. After that, no changes can be made to the bill. That's it. If both houses pass the bill, then finally it gets to the President. Okay. I think that's all. I think that's our fun with committees. To close out Chapter 4, we'll go ahead and do a chapter review. Answer the following 6 questions to the best of your ability. It's kind of fun to see what you know. And if you don't remember, feel free to use the back button and to review.